Just going to quickly go through assignment 1. Basically for answers 1 and 2, the big difference between the two of them is, did you add in a telecom company and an ISP? In terms of the questions, as long as you made any well-reasoned argument, you've got most of the points. I took off 1 point if you didn't get the exact argument. Why? Because that was reserved for people who had the greatest insight. When you have competition, the question is, true competition is about people who are evenly matched, going head to head and toe to toe. The thing is, a lot of you talked about apps or software providers or whatever. What do they all try to do? They all try to differentiate themselves. They're all trying to tell you how they're different. And so you use certain apps in certain places and certain apps or other. And not only that, there tends to be somebody who's dominating. And so like Yelp or somebody like that. And so, is that really competition? And so it's really not necessarily the number, but the number of companies who are actually engaged with each other. And so the most brutal competition take place right now are the telecom companies. And the reason why is, can anybody tell me why AT&T is better than Verizon, that's better than Sprint? And so none of them have done a good job of distinguishing themselves. In terms of value, especially when you have a value chain, the question is, where's the money coming from? Well, the money's coming from the customer. The closer you can get to the customer, the more value you can capture. So out of all these companies in this chain, who's made the most money? Apple. Why? They're closest to the customer. They touch you the most. Now you could say, yeah, but you make an agreement with your telecom company and things like that separately. But the point is when you say closest to the customer, you're also talking about mind share of how they affect you. And this is why Apple has gone on to, never before has a device company made so much money. So that's the basic concept. And so you could say, well, gee, Dr. Joe, how are we supposed to know that? Well, simply this, and that's that you got 95% of the points if you just made any kind of good argument about who's capturing value and why. And this is what, again, industry is about. This is why there's more than one answer. But if you got the perfect answer, then you get 100. In terms of your answers for the 4 approaches, some of you forgot to talk about the 4 approaches. You just picked one, and the question specifically says analyze all 4. What I'm looking for is for you to make a good argument, and you can make a good argument about any of these. But standing pat, the problem is in tech businesses, it's constantly changing, so you run the risk of obsolescence. I wasn't looking for long answers. Some of you just wrote a couple of sentences and got full credit. As long as you say standing pat's not a good idea. Why? Because tech businesses are constantly changing. So if you stand pat, you're probably going to be left behind. That's good enough. You stated an answer, you stated a reasoning behind it. The fact is that tech businesses do change. In terms of partnering, this is the huge difference. If you pick an answer, there's a weakness to every answer. You have to address those weaknesses. As long as you address those weaknesses, then it's a good answer. If you don't address the weaknesses, it isn't. And the thing about partnerships is it's hard to coordinate activities because you're working with a company that may not have your best interests. The other salient fact is that this company, and a lot of you pointed it out, which I basically really appreciated. But what it came down to is that this is a company that's losing money on margins, and they're having problems with their current partners. If they're having problems with their current partners taking so much money, why would they want to go on and take on more partners? Changing their core of their business, such as going into apps or something like that. When you change your core competence, you have to be very, very careful, and that's the way. And I've got a typo there. That should just say core. But anyway, moving away from your core is very difficult, and that's because, and some of you, and it's probably the IT people who got it right. But when you move away from your core, you're going away from what you're good at. And when you go away from something you're good at, you have to be careful. Now, why can some companies do it and some companies don't? And we'll find this out later on. And that's that you can move to a different business, but you can't change your values. For example, the value of Virgin, the Virgin Group, Richard Branson's group, is about giving you amazing experiences. And so they do that with airlines, they do that with music stores, they do that with everything that they do. And so there's consistency in what they do. Nokia started out as a timber company, and then right now they're selling data equipment. So it's like, how the heck could they move from that to that? And the reason why Nokia has always been about, we are going to provide the infrastructure that will support Finland. That's what they're about. So back in the 1800s, what was the chief product the country needed? Timber. And then they got into rubber, and then they got into insulation for wires, and then telephone equipment, and then so on and so forth. But it's part of their culture that they know they're going to change, and so they understand how to do it, how to bring on new competencies, and so on and so forth. Changing the business model. You lose money initially, but you break even by year 4 in the long-term profits. But the longer-term profits are strong. You're going to be making 50% more. So you're willing to sacrifice 3 years in order to make 50% more. And so economically, it does make sense. Now, this whole story and case has to do with, this actually is based on a true story, and it's based on Sun Microsystems. And for those of you who remember Sun Microsystems, they made networking equipment, they made servers. They most primarily sold through their channel partners, and they were getting bled dry. And so the CEO, Scott McNeely, had my MBA group and in fact, our entire MBA class to go out and research opportunities in 3G. And so we came back, and my group's recommendation is that they should go into the services business. That's the business that's growing. They can get rid of their channel partners. They can get closer to the customer. And so that was our recommendation. And McNeely shot us down left and right. Now, as it turns out, I was right and I was wrong. And I kicked myself afterwards. I was right in the sense that this is what IBM and HP did, and they made a lot of money and they did very well. So in that sense, I was correct. However, I picked a second-tier answer, and the reason why I was kicking myself is because I remembered from marketing, whoever gets closest to the customer wins. It's not the networking equipment or software like Java. Okay, Java comes pretty close to touching the customer because it's software. But ultimately, is software really an engaging experience? I mean, it all kind of looks alike. The only difference is that the function. There's a reason why everything looks like Microsoft. They make it that way. So you can learn how to use it very quickly. The key here is who comes closest to the customer, and guess what? Those were the device makers. If they had got into the device making business early on, they could have captured a bigger part of the value chain and made even more money than services. And that's where Dr. Cho was kicking himself. He put a good answer, but he didn't pick the best answer. And the reason why he was so mad at himself is that I made a conceptual error. And I don't like making conceptual errors. But anyway, so these are actually based on true stories. The big thing about that fourth part is you can do the math. You can actually run through it, and that's why I gave you hints about running dummy variables and all. A lot of you figured it out, and some of you didn't. But anyway, here's where you can do it. The big thing is that you didn't need to look at both sides of the revenue. The only part of revenue you need to look at is you're making a decision between one approach and another. So it's only that part that's different that you need to look at. And so this goes into your decision making. Okay, what's the question? Should I go A or B? Okay, how do I compare A or B? And then it becomes a discipline of doing it for each year. And so this is actually a prelude to case 1, which I'm in the process of grading.